Welcome to All Right in Sin City, a podcast about writers and writing in the Windsor-Detroit region. Your podcasters today are
Irene Moore Davis, author, educator, and local historian.
Kim Conklin, Windsor-based writer and filmmaker.
And me, Sarah Jarvis, former bookseller, publishing rep, and literary festival chair.
This recording takes place online in the era of safe physical distancing. Our featured guest is Kevin Spenst. Kevin Spenst, a Pushcart Prize nominee, is the author of Ignite, Jabbering with Bing Bong, and over a dozen chapbooks, including Pray Goodbye, Word Notes, Flip-Flop Faces, and Unexpurgated Lives, and Upend. His work has won the Lush Triumphant Award for Poetry, been nominated for both the Alfred G Prize and the Robert Kroetsch Award for Innovative Poetry, and has appeared in dozens of publications, including Prairie Fire, CB2, BafterC, Lemon, Hound, Poetry is Dead, and the Best Canadian Poetry 2019 anthology. He lives on unceded Coast Salish territory, Vancouver, with the love of his life, Shauna Kaendo. His latest book is Hearts Amok, a memoir in verse, released in May by Anvil Press. Kevin will be appearing at this year's virtual Book Fest Windsor on October 17th, and we hope to see you all there. Welcome, Kevin.
Hello, hi, welcome, and hello, thanks for having me.
So when did you first fall in love with poetry?
Oh, well, I'd say I've fallen in love with poetry many times over the course of my life, from when I was a kid, and I guess all kids, the majority of kids have songs and nursery rhymes and, that extra lyrical bump to the literature that's presented to them. I loved that. I was reflecting on a little what do they call those? Oh gosh, I've forgotten the particular brand name of those, the little golden books. So I was remembering one just the other day with a friend, a tugboat, and simple story, but something very conscious in the language choice for rhythm often in those books. So as a kid, I loved it along, I think, with everybody else. And then as a teen, it was on a trip to Ontario with my family to visit my sister and brother-in-law who moved out to Beaverton. And I was at a store and I had a little extra money and I bought, it was a choice between a Mad magazine or an anthology of poetry. And I had lots of Mad magazines. So I bought this anthology of poetry, and Dylan Thomas and E. Cummings and all these voices that are very lyrical, and that kind of got me in that state of mind as a teenager. And then most recently, 12 years ago, I was at UBC doing my MFA. I thought I was going to do fiction, and I took a poetry class, and then I was like, what am I doing taking fiction? I should be taking poetry. It's where the fun is, and the polyvocalities. There are so many different voices and ways of expressing those voices that really excited me. In fact, it was a class with Keith Maylard, and he read some John Berryman, and he read the poem, and then afterwards he's like, what does that even mean? Who knows? And he laughed. He had this cackle, and actually that set me down a John Berryman path for a little while too, reading his work. So it's been a number of times, and I'm sure I'll fall in love. I mean, I'm deeply in love with it right now, reading it, writing it, thinking about it, and it's so rich, and it has such a history. I'm sure I'll drift off into prose at some point, and then I look forward to kind of falling in love with poetry again down the road at some point.
And you are a prolific writer. Can you describe your writing routine? Do you write every day? Is there a certain place where it's just, that's the spot where you write?
Yeah, Generally, when I can, I write first thing in the morning. I love waking up early. Today, it's been so windy here in Vancouver, so I woke up just before the sun rose to these winds that were whipping in. And I wake up and I kind of think about my dreams. I try to get images down into my journal right away. And then from those dreams, then memories of the previous day, ideas. And I journal write for an hour or something. And more often than not, that kind of then morphs into whatever projects I'm working on. And in that way, it kind of keeps it fresh, and it connects it to the energies of, the moment and my, where I am. I write from home, and generally, either on the couch, on my laptop, or a little workstation that we set up. My partner works next to me on our long table that we don't use for entertaining anymore. So now it's piled up with books and all of her stuff, and it's become a very efficient kind of workstation over there. And then sometimes I'll take my laptop out into the world and write at a picnic table in the park or outside a coffee shop. And and then I just try to take notes when I can, put them down on my phone, note individual lines or bigger ideas. And that has helped. Also, I started writing later in life. I went back to do my MFA in creative writing when I was 40, and I had been writing for maybe 5, 6, 7 years on a kind of daily basis. So I kind of started later in the game. So I have lots of stuff to get off my chest. A lot of confessions.
Well, last year you participated in a 2-month residency at the Joy Kagawa House. Am I pronouncing that properly?
Yeah.
Okay. And that was Joy Kagawa's childhood home. What was the most positive impact of that residency on you and your writing?
Yeah. It was really exciting to be able to spend those 2 months in Marpole. That's kind of South Vancouver, right by Richmond, in a neighborhood where along with the Japanese Canadian community I suppose it goes back, early 20th century, and then other immigrant populations. My mom had actually lived there briefly, just down the street in I think it was late 30s at some point. Her family, they were refugees. Her parents were refugees from the Ukraine/Russia, and they'd come here after the Russian Revolution, and they were part of the Mennonite, kind of a Mennonite wave of migration to Canada. And there was a small Mennonite community a little ways east, and they were kind of on the outskirts of that area. And her father worked on Sea Island, not too far away. So it was amazing to be in a house that was in a neighborhood that had so much history. And I was able to not only think about the history of Mennonites in Canada, but that alongside Japanese Canadian histories, and then bike back home in the West End along the Arbutus Greenway, which is this lovely route that follows the old train that would take commuters from downtown to Marpole and back in. And so it was interesting to physically be in these places where this history took place and be able to imagine it in a very embodied way. It was wonderful. And Anne-Marie Metten, who is one of the organizers behind the Joy Kagawa House, lived around the street. So it was lovely to kind of see her from time to time, and then just have time to write, and not only have a room of my own, but a house to live in. And it was a very interesting experience. And it was multifaceted in lots of wonderful ways. I helped organize an event with writers and members of the writing community, and it was lovely to see so many faces and help facilitate lots of different communities coming together, which I would say was one of the highlights.
What a different experience than what we're all living now. Yeah.
Yes.
So for years, you've co-hosted a radio program in Vancouver called Wax Poetic. You have interviewed a lot of fellow poets along the way. How did you get involved in that endeavor, and what have you learned from the experience?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I was working some years back with this fellow, Charles Boylan, and he had a political talk show on Co-op Radio. And he had run for the Marxist-Leninist Party of Canada several times over the course of his life, and he was a red diaper baby. That is, he came to Canada in the 50s. His father was a communist. And it's funny, just a little side story. Another coworker, Rosemary, and she was also from America originally. I'm going to try to do her accent. It's unique, but we were kind of feting Charles one afternoon, and we were talking about how greatly appreciated he was. And Rosemary said, when I first met you, I thought you were maybe a bit of a blowhard, but then I found out that you were, you know, a true red diaper baby, and you were kind of bounced on the knee of Paul Robespierre, and I knew you were the real thing. And he was he was amazing. Anyway, he had a show at work. I had talked to him about poetry, and he was like, oh yeah, poetry, but you know, the workers' movement, and we have to do very practical things. I'm like, yeah, but poetry. And so I convinced him to have a poetry-focused program on his show. And I invited some friends. Ellie Kralji Gardner read, and Rita Wong, she read. And I was also part of this. Pamela Bentley, who was one of the co-hosts at Wax Poetic at the time, who I knew through the poetry world, she heard me on the air on his show. And she was like, oh, Kevin's got an okay radio voice. And they were thinking of having another co-host at the time, her and R.C. Wislowski. And so, yeah, by chance, it all lined up. And she asked me to co-host. And it was very cool to be part of something that, well, again, allowed me to reach out to different people and ask them if they were interested in talking about poetry. And I learned so much from the get-go. And I learned so much from Pam Bentley and R.C. Wislowski from the beginning. That is kind of getting to the point. As you probably can guess by now, I meander all over the place and I kind of stumble and wander. And it's fine if you're a writer and you have time to edit. But, you know, in person it's like, oh, really? Are you going to get to the point? So with them, it was so instructive to see them cut to the chase and really get to the heart of the matter and ask those essential questions right away. I still learn so much from them. Well, RC, Pam is no longer a co-host, but with RC and Lucia Mesh, who I've also co-hosted with, it's wonderful. I feel like I'm at the adults table and I'm just listening. I get to listen in, and then occasionally I'll bring up a super nerdy poetry question. I'll be like, oh, I noticed this, you know, how this line scans and blah, blah, blah. But it's wonderful. It's amazing to read people's work on the page and then get to hear them read it. And then you compare and kind of contrast and think about voice. And, you know, there's the finding your voice type thing, which is a bit trite, but there's some truth to that, finding your voice, like your voice as it is out in the world. How is that replicated on the page? And it's fascinating to kind of consider the various strategies people have taken to kind of get it down on the page so that in fact you do hear something, you do hear this quote unquote voice.
Your voice in Hearts Amok, Memoir in Verse, is a collection of poems about love, your personal history of seeking and finding love, the history of love, and to some degree traditions of love poetry. What led you to write this book?
Yeah, so I do like packing a lot of things into small places, however I can swing it. And I've been writing love poems from, you know, when I was a teenager, love-lorn poems. And then while at UBC, falling in love with poetry again, I then started writing love poems again too. Actually, just maybe 3 years before going back to UBC, I wrote a love poem for my partner at the time, and it felt exciting to do that again. And then to see this tradition and take this tradition more seriously was also energizing. And my wife and I broke up just after I finished my MFA, which led to more poetry. What do you do? What do you do after you finish an MFA and a marriage ends, but you write poetry to work your way through it, and to consider how thought and emotion kind of work together through language. And then I started dating, and then I'm writing more poetry, and so that was 10 years ago. And so Hearts Amok kind of chronicles the end of the end of the marriage, and then dating in the time of social media platforms and dating online, and thinking about that. And then also the history of the love sonnet, the love poem itself, and what it meant in the Middle Ages. And it's not a stretch the imagination to see that love poems have a pretty there's something a little sinister about them way back when, thinking about Cupid with his arrow that hits right in somebody's eyeball. That's kind of in Chaucer's The Knight's Tale. There's a character who's kind of been wounded. Cupid has shot him in the eye, and that's just how it goes. Like, that's what you expect. Like, okay. And then there's this pain, and what is that? It's quite awful and kind of dramatic. So I think it's the violence of the era that's kind of weaponized and then used to certainly to control women. And so I look at that, and so of course there's this fraud history, but you can't. That's not a love. How do you put that history into the present, and how do you understand that history in a present where you want to rework it so that it does become something beautiful? So that's one way of explaining some of the poems. And I also take some of that medieval language and then mix in a bit of hobo slang, because that also felt like an interesting lexicon to explore, and thinking about this solo kind of man and the language of the hobo, especially as it rose, as it historically arose with the development of the railway and movement across North America. And again, thinking about wandering and exploring and discovering. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to kind of try this as an experiment, to mix all these different voices together.
Well, we've formed an impression of you that that you love touring and performing, often with some volume, and engaging with people at live readings. This year, when many other writers were relying on solely virtual readings to launch their work, you managed to complete 30 physically distanced outdoor pop-up readings to promote your new book. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, and first of all, I want to say I'm so sorry I have not been to Windsor. I haven't toured Windsor yet. I get letters from somebody in Windsor every month or two. I get 6 pages of a letter from this amazing poet in Windsor who I haven't met, but I reviewed his book some years back, and I get these beautiful letters from him. They're very artful and interesting. And so it's very, I have this very special connection to Windsor, in that this place where these words come from. That's Gustav Marin. So I had my book coming out in April, and then COVID, and then the search for a venue became a moot point. And when it became apparent that people were doing things outside, and it was fine to do things outside, then I decided to make use of this a moss garden that I'd made in the middle of the forest. We were all going through the darkest days of April in the rain here in Vancouver, and I was jogging just to kind of move my body and take a break from all the writing and reading. And then I found myself kind of making this moss garden next to this other moss garden that has been there for ages. And suddenly I had no idea what I was doing. I was just kind of moving and connecting to nature. And then I realized I'd made a stage. So I was like, oh, so this is my venue. So here I've made my venue in the middle of the forest. But I wanted that as kind of the last reading of my book launch day. but I also, of course, wanted to connect with more people. And thinking of how things were happening outside, I thought, well, why not just do a whole bunch of readings in one day and then end in the mosque garden in the forest. So I organized 10 readings that day, started at outside a friend's place in East Van. They were on the 3rd floor. They've got a balcony. So I kind of serenaded them. Some other friends kind of arrived. And then we biked together to the next venue. And then we cycled to another venue. People came and went, and there were people who were surprised that this was happening. It was rainy a little bit. Kim from the Paper Hound, the bookstore, brought beers along. So it was like people were contributing things, and it was amazing. And then at the end of the day, I met a couple of people here in the West End, close to Stanley Park, and then we went into the park, and I did my last reading, and I was tired, and it was wonderful to kind of be exhausted in that that physical, social, emotional kind of way with so many people. My partner Shauna had filmed it at points throughout the course of the day on our phones. So it was on Facebook Live. I think every hour on the hour it was kind of on Facebook Live, and then every half hour it was on Instagram Live or something. And then other people came and filmed, and yeah, it was fun. And then from there, I kind of organized a couple of other days with other poets and readers. And it felt like a really good way to bring my book out into the world, into the lives of friends and outside of friends' homes. And it fit, especially with that troubadourish kind of quality of the book, then to actually present it. And I think Lisa Bolton, a friend, I read to her, and she lives on the 7th floor, and that was the loudest, that was the biggest kind of projection in the West End. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. I was tired for days afterwards.
I'll bet. Wow. How do you top that? What's your next project?
I don't know. It's all downhill from here. Yeah, no, I've so I mean, thinking about all these love poems that are in Hearts Amok, and then thinking about love and trying to open up the conception of love. I've been writing sonnet sequences. Well, I started one for a friend, and I'm hoping to write sequences of sonnets for other friends, just thinking of the nuances of love and friendship. Yeah, friendship certainly as a form of love. And going back to the whole, toxic masculinity and the history of toxic masculinity, and thinking about that very monolithic kind of notion of love, which is I'm the man and here's my love for the one kind of woman, and that kind of very overbearing kind of sense of love that is just kind of one voice to one person. And certainly we live in better times than the Dark Ages in some respects, and there is more of an opening of understanding of love in lots of ordinary senses. Certainly, there are all kinds of love with family and friends, and it's exciting to kind of be able to reconsider this, and then also now be at a point where I'm going to write some poems for my friend Jeff, and I'm going to read his book of poetry again and think about responding to some of his lines. Yeah, so I don't know so I don't know if I'll sing those, but but it's fun to kind of think about again, just possibilities and making new discoveries as I kind of go along, as we kind of move along.
Would you like to read or sing some of your work for our listeners?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I'll read and maybe sing and improvise. And you had asked if I would do this. I hadn't come across this word before. I love it. Sprechgesang. So
Sprechgesang.
Sprechgesang. Yeah. So I'll kind of do that sort of operatic voice.
Yeah, you could. I mean, if you really want to know, it's like a way of speaking lyrics to a song. You know who's really good at it? Fred Schneider from the B-52s.
Oh, Love Shack, baby.
Right.
Okay. So here's my B-52's version of the first poem in the collection, which fuses that chivalric high diction and some hobo slang in the title itself, along with the poem. It's called Apologia from Hoboken Christendom. If my metaphors unmake her allegorical gusto, gambling mouth, glasses glinting high to the sun, sword-swung questions, somersault quests, tongue that probes teeth or truth, if she fails to stroll before you, glaze mescal-tinted subtleties, grow blueberries from abandoned moats, craft sites for queens and gunsels, transmogrify your hands to maps, mosey off of her own accord, you can blame my sing-song spatchcock, my bindle stick stock of words, my tin ear for heating metallurgy of the dead. Blame my wingding displays of old flames, my possum water eyes, my cloudily enraptured brains, for I wandered lonely as a clod. A night of the road took my soul-rets off at the trash can blaze, and I swear she's in a note above odds, bodkins, and train whistles, in a song sustained around the jackalope roast, until infinity flatlines for broke. That's the first poem in the collection. So this next poem follows that in a similar vein of the hobo and chivalric mixed together, and it's a worshipful deriding of flim-flam. And it begins with an epigraph by the Mennonite American writer Julia Spiker Kasdorf. Mennonite and Amish women boiled dishes and silverware after a hobo finished eating. Some may have even feared spiritual infection. This poem is set in Surrey, British Columbia. There's also Surrey, England, and then there's kind of a play between those two places. And midway along our King George journey, I nodded off in a claggy corner of the bus, bum-rushed into a world wondrous strange, a land of scrap metal mayhem for a throat-clearing escutcheon scraper, and a griffin grappling a horned rabbit at Wally's corner. My gaze gathered up the side of the road, seeking hoboglyphs of a single woman. I swooned at the image merely in mind, and my heart leapt out as a Wulpatinka. It hopped extra high upon its pheasant wings, bounded down hard on its antler shadows, bolted off to I know not where. I sang in a fusion of con and pro whilst tracking myself into a forest named Before Thou Lovest Thou Must. After heartless hours, I came upon a camp of ex-evangelicals extracting theological thorns from their hides. They spoke of brain pan washing, mindset rust, how they'd swallowed so much of the corpus of Christ, their bellies now bloated in disbelief, awkwardly beghast. My insides glittered in fool's gold too. Love lustered in screeds, weaned as I was on post-Mennonite ballyhoo, chasing goosebumps moments around at Johnson Heights Evangelical, where an angel with a gilt-edged sword severed my side. I spake of how dimpled hallelujahs danced round my head, and I would give chase. My heart hopped, sniffed at renditions of sexy righteousness. Then, under hard-scrabble guilt, I'd face plant. After a gloss of faith, I forevermore shilly-shallied twixt hosannas and holy shits, like a gambling lamb along hunger lane. After a fortnight, I bid this company of unborn-again tramps adieu, walked my old love-lorn suburbopia past the smack glimmer of Guilford Castle towards the skateboards of Clover Vale. That funny heart highballed past, and I ran. It dove into a drain at the basement of my childhood. Abandon all mope, ye who enter, croon the darkness. Loosed in translation, the uprooted pipes of yore shall crumble down into your fist to flower through your fingers. This will be your torch to her truth, and forbearance shall make your cardinal points to one the other.
Thank you for joining us, Kevin Spenst.
Thanks for joining us. Look for more episodes of All Right in Sin City wherever you listen to podcasts, or check out our website, allrightinsincity.com. For information and announcements of new podcasts, sign up to our email list or follow us on Facebook and Twitter.